Thank you for being here with me. I know life can feel unbearably heavy, especially when the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you most. This story isn't easy for me to tell, but I'm sharing it because I survived it. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe. Your support means more than you know. Now let me take you back to the moment my life shattered and how I found myself again. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and cinnamon the morning everything fell apart. I remember that detail because I was baking Adam's favorite cookies, the ones with the dark chocolate chips he loved, the ones I'd been making every Sunday for 3 years. Sunlight poured through the window above the sink, turning the white subway tiles golden, and I hummed quietly to myself as I stirred the batter. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, and somewhere down the street, a lawnmower buzzed to life. It was one of those perfect suburban mornings where everything felt safe and predictable and good. I was wearing Adam's old college sweatshirt, the gray one with the faded university logo, and my hair was pulled back in a messy bun. My feet were bare on the cool kitchen floor. I'd been up since 6, even though it was Saturday, because I wanted everything to be perfect when Adam got home from his business trip. He'd been gone for 5 days, down in Atlanta for some conference, and I'd missed him terribly. I'd spent the week preparing his favorite meals, cleaning the house until it sparkled, even buying new sheets for our bed because I wanted everything to feel fresh and welcoming. The doorbell rang at 9:15. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and padded through the living room, past the couch where Adam and I had spent so many evenings wrapped in blankets watching old movies, past the bookshelf filled with the novels we'd collected together. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see 2 silhouettes. My heart jumped a little. Maybe Adam had come home early and forgotten his keys. Maybe he wanted to surprise me. I opened the door with a smile already forming on my lips. Adam stood on the porch, but he wasn't alone. My sister Victoria was beside him, her hand wrapped around his arm in a way that made my stomach drop before my brain could fully process what I was seeing. She wore a red dress I'd never seen before, something expensive and sophisticated, and her dark hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders. Adam's face was pale, his eyes avoiding mine. He was wearing the blue button-down I'd ironed for him before he left, but it was wrinkled now, as if he'd slept in it. For a moment, none of us spoke. A bird chirped somewhere in the oak tree in our front yard. A car passed on the street behind them. I stood there in the doorway, barefoot and confused, still holding the dish towel that smelled like cookie dough. "Emma," Adam finally said, my name coming out like an apology he hadn't quite figured out how to deliver yet. "What's going on?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too high and thin. Victoria stepped forward, and I noticed she was wearing new perfume, something sharp and expensive that I didn't recognize. "We need to talk," she said, and there was something in her tone that I'd never heard before, not quite pity, not quite triumph, something in between that made my skin crawl. I stepped back automatically, letting them into the house I'd spent all week perfecting for Adam's return. They walked into the living room, and I noticed how Victoria's eyes swept over everything with a strange familiarity, as if she were cataloging what belonged to whom. Adam sat on the edge of our couch, his hands clasped between his knees. Victoria remained standing, her arms crossed, that red dress brilliant against the neutral tones of our living room. "I'm in love with Victoria," Adam said, the words tumbling out fast, like he'd been practicing them. "We've been seeing each other for 6 months. I didn't mean for it to happen, Emma, but it did, and I can't keep lying to you." 6 months, the words echoed in my head. 6 months meant holidays. 6 months meant birthdays. 6 months meant every time I'd kissed him goodbye, every time I'd told him I loved him, every time I'd planned our future together, he'd been with her, with my sister. I looked at Victoria. She met my gaze without flinching. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she said, but her voice carried no real remorse. "But Adam and I are meant to be together. What you two had was comfortable, Emma, but it wasn't real passion. It wasn't what Adam needs." The dish towel slipped from my hands and landed on the hardwood floor with a soft thump. "You're my sister," I whispered. "And you're my sister," Victoria replied, her voice sharpening. "Which is why I tried to wait, tried to do the right thing. But love doesn't follow rules, Emma. I thought you'd understand that. I thought you'd want Adam to be happy, even if it wasn't with you." The logic was so twisted it made my head spin. Adam stood up, his hands raised like he was approaching a frightened animal. "Emma, please. I know this is hard, but we can handle this like adults. I'll move out this week. We can split everything fairly. I'll make sure you're taken care of." "Taken care of?" I repeated, like I'm some kind of obligation. "That's not what I meant." He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture I'd always found endearing, suddenly seeming performative and false. "I just mean we can do this civilly. No drama, no lawyers. Just two people who realized they weren't right for each other and moved on." Victoria moved closer to Adam, her hand finding his. They stood there together in my living room, in the home we'd bought together, beneath the framed photos of our wedding day that still hung on the walls. "Emma, you're too dependent," Victoria said, her voice taking on that older sister tone she'd used when we were children, when she was explaining why I couldn't play with her and her friends. "You've always clung to people, always needed validation. Adam needs someone stronger, someone who can match him. This is actually better for you in the long run. You'll learn to stand on your own." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them both out. I wanted to collapse on the floor and sob until I couldn't breathe. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, as Victoria explained to me why my husband falling in love with her was actually a gift, actually a learning opportunity, actually something I should be grateful for because it would force me to grow. "I need you both to leave," I finally managed. "Emma, we need to talk about the house, about the accounts," Adam started. "Get out!" My voice cracked. They exchanged a glance, one of those couples' glances that speaks volumes without words. Victoria grabbed her purse from where she'd set it on the side table, a designer bag I recognized as one she'd been eyeing for months, but claimed she couldn't afford. "We'll give you some time," she said. "But Emma, eventually you're going to have to face reality. Adam and I are together now. We're going to get married. You can either accept it gracefully or make things difficult for everyone." They left. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood in the living room for a long time, not moving, barely breathing. The smell of cookies baking drifted in from the kitchen, and then I smelled them burning. I didn't go to save them. I just stood there while the smoke alarm started beeping, a high-pitched wail that matched the screaming inside my head. That was the beginning. That was the moment my life split into, before and after. The next 3 weeks dissolved into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Adam returned 2 days after the revelation with our friend Marcus, who couldn't meet my eyes as he helped Adam load boxes into a U-Haul. I watched from the bedroom window as they carried out his clothes, his books, his record collection. Victoria pulled up in her silver sedan halfway through, bringing coffee for the guys, playing the role of supportive new girlfriend with such ease it made me nauseous. She waved up at me. Actually waved like this was all perfectly normal. I didn't wave back. The house became a hollow shell. Every room echoed with absence. I'd find Adam's things everywhere. A phone charger behind the nightstand, his running shoes in the hall closet, a coffee mug with his company logo in the back of the cabinet, and each discovery felt like a small death. I collected these items in a cardboard box that I kept meaning to drop off but never did. My mother called on a Thursday evening. I was sitting in the dark living room, hadn't turned on the lights when the sun set, just sat there watching shadows creep across the walls. My phone lit up with her contact photo, and I almost didn't answer. But habit and hope made me pick up. "Victoria told me," Mom said, skipping any greeting. "Emma, how could you drive Adam away like that?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Drive him away? Mom, he cheated on me with Victoria. For 6 months, Victoria explained everything, Mom interrupted, her voice tight with disapproval. "She said you'd become controlling and cold. She said Adam tried to make it work, but you pushed him away. And now you're trying to make her feel guilty for finding love? Emma, I raised you better than that." "That's not what happened." I was standing now, pacing the dark room, my phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt. "Victoria is lying. They were seeing each other behind my back. Victoria doesn't lie," Mom said firmly. "She's always been the responsible one, the successful one. You've always been jealous of her ever since you were little, and now you can't handle that she's found happiness. She stole my husband. You can't steal a person, Emma. Adam made a choice. Maybe instead of blaming Victoria, you should look at why he made that choice. What did you do to push him into her arms?" I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor, the screen cracking in a spiderweb pattern. I didn't pick it up. I slid down the wall and sat there on the floor, my knees pulled to my chest, and realized that Victoria had gotten to our mother first. She'd shaped the narrative, painted herself as the reluctant participant in a love story, painted me as the bitter, jealous failure. And our mother had believed her. Of course she had. Victoria had always been the golden child. Victoria with her MBA and her downtown loft and her successful marketing career. Victoria, who showed up to family dinners with expensive wine and stories about client meetings and business trips. What did I have? A job as a middle school art teacher, a modest house in the suburbs, a quiet life that seemed, in comparison to Victoria's glossy existence, somehow less valuable. The divorce papers arrived by courier on a Monday morning. I signed for them in my pajamas, hadn't showered in 2 days, my hair greasy and tangled. The courier looked at me with poorly concealed pity. I carried the manila envelope inside and set it on the kitchen table, where it sat for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. When I finally did, I discovered Adam was asking for half of everything. Half the house we'd bought with money from my grandmother's inheritance. Half the savings account I'd contributed to faithfully every month while he'd spent freely. Half the furniture I'd picked out, refinished, arranged with care. The papers were cold and legal and reduced our 3 years of marriage to a series of asset divisions. I called the number listed for his lawyer, got a receptionist who put me on hold, waited for 18 minutes listening to smooth jazz while my hands shook around my cracked phone. Finally, got through to a paralegal who explained in a bored voice that yes, in this state, marital assets were divided equally regardless of contribution, and no, the fact that Adam had committed adultery didn't change the financial settlement unless I wanted to make things messy and expensive with a contested divorce. "How expensive?" I asked. "Retainer starts at $5,000, she said. "Total cost could be anywhere from $15,000 to $40,000, depending on how long it drags out. And Mr. Westbrook's attorney has made it clear they're prepared to fight for a fair division of all assets, including your inheritance contribution, which was commingled with marital funds." I hung up. I didn't have $5,000. I barely had $500. I taught art to middle schoolers. My salary was a joke. Adam had been the primary earner, his job in medical device sales pulling in 3 times what I made. I'd always been okay with that. I'd believed in our partnership, in the idea that money was just money and we were building a life together. Now that life was being itemized and divided, and I had no way to fight it. I signed the papers. I packed up Adam's remaining things. I put the house on the market because I couldn't afford the mortgage alone. I moved through these motions like a ghost, functioning but not really present, going to work and teaching my classes and grading papers. But inside I was screaming. The school district had a mandatory mental health check-in that spring. All teachers had to meet with a counselor for 15 minutes, just a box to check for insurance purposes. I sat across from a woman named Dr. Reeves in a stuffy office that smelled like old books and tried to smile and say I was fine. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Are you sleeping?" she asked. "Not really." "Eating? When I remember? Do you have support? Friends? Family?" I thought about my mother, who hadn't called since I hung up on her. I thought about Marcus and our other couple friends, who'd all seemed to fade away when the divorce started, probably uncomfortable with the messiness of it all, probably hearing Victoria's version of events and believing that I was the problem. I thought about my co-workers, who were kind but distant, who had their own lives and problems. "Not really," I said again. Dr. Reeves wrote something on her notepad. "Emma, I'm going to give you some resources, therapists who work on a sliding scale, support groups, crisis hotlines. I need you to promise me you'll call someone if things get dark." "I'm not going to hurt myself," I said, surprised by the suggestion. "I'm not just talking about that kind of dark," she replied gently. "I'm talking about the kind of dark where you stop caring, where you stop fighting. That's dangerous too." I took the list she offered. I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. I never called any of the numbers. The house sold in 6 weeks. I had to be out by the end of July. I spent my summer break packing up 3 years of married life into boxes, sorting through everything Adam and I had built together, deciding what to keep and what to donate and what to throw away. It was archaeological, excavating layers of our relationship, wedding gifts we'd never used, vacation souvenirs from trips that felt like they'd happened in another lifetime, cards and letters and photos. I kept the photos, even though looking at them hurt. Kept them in a shoebox that I told myself I'd go through later when I was stronger, but I never did. Victoria called me twice during the packing. The first time to ask if I still had the punch bowl set our aunt had given us as a wedding gift, because she and Adam were registered at Pottery Barn, and she thought maybe I didn't need it anymore. I hung up on her, the second time to tell me she was pregnant. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said, her voice bright with a happiness that felt obscene. "Before Mom tells you, we're so excited, Emma. Adam is going to be such a good father." I held the phone away from my ear. I could still hear her voice, tinny and distant, talking about nursery colors and baby names. I pressed end call, and then I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall, and the screen shattered completely this time, broke into pieces that scattered across the floor like confetti. I got a new phone the next day, a cheap prepaid one from the drugstore. I didn't give Victoria the number. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of town in August. It was all I could afford after the divorce settlement barely covered my debts, and Adam's lawyer fees ate into what little remained. The building was old, with thin walls and a radiator that clanked all night and water stains on the ceiling that looked like continents. My furniture from the house looked wrong in the small space, too big and too full of memories. My first night there, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and ate Chinese takeout straight from the container and cried. Not the dramatic, cathartic crying you see in movies. Just tears sliding down my face while I chewed lo mein and stared at the blank walls. School started in 2 weeks. I didn't know how I was going to stand in front of 30 kids and pretend to be whole. September arrived with unseasonable heat. The middle school where I taught had inadequate air conditioning, and my classroom on the 3rd floor became a sweatbox by midday. I taught my students about color theory and perspective, while sweat trickled down my back and my head pounded from dehydration and lack of sleep. One of my 8th graders, a quiet girl named Sophia, stayed after class one Friday. She approached my desk hesitantly while I was gathering papers, my hands full of still life drawings that needed grading. "Ms. Emma," she said, "are you okay?" I looked up, surprised. "Of course. Why do you ask?" She twisted her hands together. "You just seem sad, like all the time. And you're really thin now. My mom noticed at parent-teacher conferences." I didn't know what to say. This 13-year-old child had seen through all my carefully constructed normalcy. "I'm fine," I managed. "Just a busy semester." "My parents got divorced last year," Sophia said quietly. "It was really bad. My mom cried a lot. She looked like you do now." She paused, then added, "She's better now, though. It took a while, but she's happy again. I just wanted you to know that it can get better." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at her words in my mind. It can get better, such a simple statement. I wanted desperately to believe it. October brought my birthday. I turned 31 alone in my apartment, eating a cupcake from the grocery store and watching television shows I didn't care about. My phone rang once, an unknown number I didn't answer. Victoria left a voicemail. I deleted it without listening. Mom sent a card. Inside she'd written, "Hope you're doing well. Victoria and Adam's baby shower is next month if you'd like to come. We'd love to see you. Try to be happy for them." I threw the card away. Then I took it out of the trash and read it again, searching for any hint of maternal concern, any acknowledgement of my pain. There was nothing, just an invitation to celebrate the family my ex-husband was building with my sister. I didn't respond. November arrived with freezing rain that turned the city gray and miserable. I slipped on ice in the school parking lot and bruised my hip badly, limped through a week of classes before the pain finally subsided. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't ask. The loneliness was a physical thing now, a weight I carried everywhere. I'd go days without speaking to anyone outside of classroom instructions. My apartment was silent except for the radiator and the couple arguing in the unit next door. I stopped cooking meals and ate mostly cereal and toast. I stopped painting, even though art had always been my refuge. I stopped doing most things except going to work and coming home and waiting for the next day to start so I could do it all again. Dr. Reeves stopped me in the hallway at school one day in early December. "Emma," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I need you to talk to someone. You're not okay. I can see it. Everyone can see it." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You're not. You're disappearing. Please." She pressed a business card into my hand. "This is my personal therapist. She's wonderful. She works on sliding scale. Promise me you'll call her." I took the card to be polite. I didn't call. Instead, I went home to my empty apartment and stood in the shower until the hot water ran out, stood there shivering in the cold spray, and wondered how much longer I could keep going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly pointless. Christmas break arrived like a reprieve and a curse. 2 weeks with nothing to do, and no one to see. I stayed in my apartment and watched the world turn white with snow outside my windows. I didn't put up decorations. I didn't buy gifts. I existed in a strange, timeless bubble where days blended together. On Christmas Eve, I walked to the grocery store because I needed milk and bread. The streets were empty, everyone home with their families, warm lights glowing in windows. I walked past houses decorated with twinkling lights and inflatable snowmen, and felt like a ghost observing a world I no longer belonged to. The grocery store was nearly empty. Sad Christmas music played over the speakers. I got my milk and bread and stood in the self-checkout line behind an elderly man buying a single frozen dinner. We didn't speak to each other. What was there to say? Walking back, I passed a church with its doors open, golden light and music spilling out into the snowy night. I stopped. I'm not particularly religious, haven't been since I was a child, but something about that light pulled me. I went inside. The service was already underway. Families filled the pews, children squirming in their nice clothes, parents singing hymns. I stood in the back, holding my grocery bag, my coat dripping melting snow on the worn carpet. No one turned to look at me. I was invisible even here. The priest spoke about hope and redemption and new beginnings. His words washed over me without landing. But then the congregation sang Silent Night, and the melody was so beautiful and sad that something inside me cracked. Tears slid down my face. I didn't wipe them away. I just stood there and cried silently while everyone sang about holy nights and tender and mild. And when the song ended, I slipped out into the night. I walked home through the snow, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than numbness. I felt grief, real and raw and huge, and it hurt terribly. But it was something. It was proof I was still alive. That night, I took out Dr. Reeves's business card. I looked at the name, Dr. Sarah Chen, licensed therapist. I saved the number in my phone but didn't call, not yet, but maybe soon. January arrived with bitter cold and a new semester. I returned to school feeling hollowed out, but slightly more present. Sophia smiled at me in the hallway, and I smiled back. Small victory. My phone rang on a Tuesday evening in late January. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, had gotten used to letting calls go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Emma? Victoria's voice. She sounded strange, shaky. What do you want? She paused. I heard her breathing, uneven and hitching. I need your help. I almost hung up. My finger hovered over the button. I can't imagine what help you think I could possibly give you. Adam left, she said, the words tumbling out. He's gone. He emptied our bank account and moved to Phoenix with some woman he met online. I'm 7 months pregnant, Emma, and he just left. He said he wasn't ready for fatherhood. He said it was all too much pressure. He just left. I sat down heavily on my couch. The irony was so thick I could taste it. So call Mom. I did. She said I made my bed and now I have to lie in it. She said I destroyed your marriage and this is my karma. Victoria's voice cracked completely. Emma, please, I have no one. My bank account is frozen. He maxed out my credit cards. I can't make rent. I don't know what to do. I should have felt satisfaction. I should have felt vindicated. This was the karma payoff, the moment where my sister got what she deserved. But instead, I just felt tired. Why are you calling me? I asked quietly. Because you're my sister. Because despite everything, I thought maybe you'd understand what it feels like to be left. I thought maybe you'd have compassion. She was crying now, full sobs that made her words barely intelligible. I was wrong, Emma. I was so wrong about everything. About Adam, about you, about what love was supposed to be. I destroyed your life, and I'm so sorry. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I don't have anyone else. I closed my eyes. I thought about that church on Christmas Eve, about standing in the back crying while everyone sang about peace and hope. I thought about Sophia telling me it gets better. I thought about the person I'd been before Adam and Victoria broke me, the person who believed in kindness and second chances. Where are you? I asked. I picked Victoria up from her downtown loft an hour later. She sat in the lobby of her building surrounded by suitcases, her pregnant belly prominent under a winter coat I recognized as one she'd bought with Adam's money. She looked terrible. Her hair was lank, her eyes red and swollen, her face puffy. She got into my car without speaking. I drove us back to my tiny apartment in silence. "I only have one bedroom," I said as I unlocked my door. "You can sleep on the couch." "Thank you," Victoria whispered. She moved in that night. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just the simple human act of not leaving someone to suffer alone, even when they deserved it, even when they'd caused your suffering. The first week was excruciating. We barely spoke. Victoria slept 16 hours a day, exhausted from pregnancy and stress. I went to work and came home and made simple dinners that we ate in silence. The apartment felt even smaller with 2 people in it, especially with Victoria's growing belly taking up space on my couch. But slowly something began to shift. Victoria started talking, halting confessions at first, whispered apologies in the dark after I'd gone to bed. She told me how Adam had pursued her, how he'd complained about me constantly, how he'd painted me as cold and unavailable and made Victoria feel like she was rescuing him. She told me how exciting it had been at first, the secrecy and the passion, how she'd convinced herself it was real love, and not just the thrill of taking something that belonged to someone else. She told me how quickly it had soured, how Adam became critical of her too, finding fault with everything she did, how he'd started staying out late, being secretive with his phone, how she'd found messages from other women and confronted him, and he'd told her she was paranoid and controlling, the same things he'd said about me. "He's a narcissist," Victoria said one night, her hand resting on her belly. "I didn't see it, because I didn't want to see it. I wanted to believe I'd won some prize. But you can't win a person, Emma. You can't compete for love. I was so stupid." "You were," I agreed. "You destroyed my life because you wanted to feel special." She flinched but nodded. "I did, and I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know that I see what I did. I see how badly I hurt you, and I hate myself for it." I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to absolve her. But hearing her acknowledge the damage helped somehow. It validated my pain in a way nothing else had. Victoria's daughter was born on a cold February night. I drove her to the hospital at 2 a.m. when her water broke, her gripping my hand so hard I thought my bones would break. I stayed with her through 14 hours of labor, held her hand while she screamed, wiped her face with cool cloths, and whispered encouragement, even though part of me still wanted to hate her. When they placed the baby in Victoria's arms, a tiny wrinkled thing with Adam's nose and Victoria's dark hair, my sister looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "I'm calling her Grace," Victoria said. "Grace Emma, after you, because you gave me grace when I deserved none." I started crying too. Not tears of forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But tears of recognition that something broken was beginning, slowly, to mend. Victoria lived with me for 8 months. We learned to coexist in that tiny apartment, learned to navigate the damage between us. She got a job doing remote marketing work from home while I was at school. She contributed to rent and groceries as soon as her paycheck started coming in. She took care of Grace with fierce devotion, this tiny baby who hadn't asked to be born into such complicated circumstances. I helped with late-night feedings. I held Grace while Victoria showered. I taught Victoria how to soothe her when she cried, tricks I'd learned from babysitting in college. We became something like partners in survival, not quite sisters again, but not enemies anymore either. One evening in October, nearly a year after Victoria had called me desperate and alone, we sat on my small balcony while Grace slept inside. The air was crisp with autumn, leaves turning gold and red in the trees below. "I talked to a lawyer," Victoria said. "Adam's required to pay child support. The state tracked him down in Arizona. He's fighting it, but he'll lose. The money won't be much, but it's enough that I can get my own place. Start over properly." I nodded. "That's good." "I don't want you to think I'm abandoning you after everything you've done for me." "You're not abandoning me, Victoria. You're building a life. That's what you should do." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom called yesterday. She wanted to see Grace. I told her not until she apologized to you. Really apologized, not just her dismissive, 'I'm sorry you're upset' non-apology. She hung up on me." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You saved me, Emma. You saved us. And I'm not going to let anyone, not even Mom, diminish that or pretend like what happened to you didn't matter. You're worth more than that. You always were. I just couldn't see it through my own selfishness." I reached over and took her hand. We sat there holding hands like we had when we were children, before competition and jealousy had poisoned everything between us, before Adam had driven a wedge that had nearly destroyed us both. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "I don't know when it happened exactly, but somewhere along the way, watching you fight to build something good for Grace, watching you face your mistakes, I let it go. The anger, the betrayal. I'm tired of carrying it." Victoria squeezed my hand, tears sliding down her face. "Thank you." Victoria moved into her own apartment in November. It was a modest place in a family-friendly neighborhood, 2 bedrooms with a small yard. I helped her move, carried boxes up the stairs while she directed where everything should go. Grace babbled happily from her playpen, oblivious to the significance of the day. My apartment felt empty after they left, but it was a different kind of empty than before. Not the hollowness of loss, but the spaciousness of possibility. I called Dr. Chen the next week, made an appointment, started the long overdue work of healing myself, not for anyone else, but because I deserved to be whole again. Therapy was hard. Dr. Chen made me look at patterns I'd spent years avoiding, the way I'd made myself small in my marriage, the way I'd sought validation externally instead of building it internally, the way I'd let Victoria's betrayal define me for too long. We worked on boundaries and self-worth and the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. "Forgiving Victoria doesn't mean what she did was okay," Dr. Chen told me during one session. "It means you've chosen not to let her actions poison your future. That's powerful, Emma. That's freedom." I started painting again. Small things at first, watercolors of the view from my balcony, still lifes of the objects in my apartment. Then bigger pieces, abstracts that poured out all the emotion I'd been holding inside. I painted betrayal in angry reds and blacks. I painted loneliness in blues and grays. I painted hope in soft golds and greens. One of my pieces won a small local competition. The prize was $200 and a showing at a community gallery. I stood at the opening, sipping cheap wine, looking at my painting on the white wall, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Victoria came to the opening with Grace. She stood in front of my painting for a long time, then turned to me with understanding in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she said, "and terrible. It's how I made you feel, isn't it?" "Part of it," I acknowledged. "But there's more in there than just you. There's me finding my way back." The school year ended. Summer arrived with heat and humidity and long, light-filled days. I spent my break painting and reading and slowly reconstructing a life that felt authentically mine. I went on a few dates, nothing serious, just practice at being social again, at trusting again in small increments. In August, a letter arrived from Adam's lawyer. He wanted to contest the child support payments, claiming Victoria had trapped him into fatherhood. The letter was full of legal language, but the subtext was clear. Adam wanted to erase his responsibilities, wanted to pretend Grace didn't exist. Victoria called me in tears. He won't even acknowledge her, his own daughter. How could I have loved someone so cruel? Because he showed you what you wanted to see, I said. And you showed him what he wanted to see. Neither of you saw each other clearly. But Victoria, you see Grace clearly. You love her fiercely and purely. That's what matters now. She fought the contestation with help from a legal aid organization. It took 4 months, but eventually the judge ruled in her favor. Adam was ordered to pay support and given visitation rights he never used. Victoria stopped hoping he'd change. She built her life around Grace and her work and slowly, carefully, her own healing. We had dinner together every Sunday, a new tradition we'd started. Sometimes at her place, sometimes at mine. We cooked simple meals and let Grace make messes with her food and talked about everything and nothing. We were rebuilding our relationship from the ground up, not pretending the past didn't happen, but choosing to move forward anyway. Mom eventually reached out. It was a Tuesday in November, nearly 2 years after Adam had left me. She called my phone, and I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Emma," she said, and her voice was different than I remembered, softer. "I owe you an apology, a real one. I failed you. When you needed your mother most, I believed Victoria's lies and abandoned you. There's no excuse for that. I let my favoritism blind me, and I'm ashamed. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to hear me say it. I was wrong." I sat down on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear. "Why now?" Victoria told me everything, how Adam left her, how you took her in anyway, how you saved her and Grace. She told me how badly she'd hurt you, how cruel I'd been. I've spent months thinking about the kind of mother I was to you both. I see now how I pitted you against each other, how I made love into a competition. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so deeply sorry. I cried. She cried. We talked for 2 hours, excavating years of hurt and favoritism and misunderstanding. It didn't fix everything. Some damage goes too deep for a single conversation. But it was a start. 3 years after Adam left me standing in our doorway, 3 years after Victoria shattered my life with casual cruelty, I stood in a small art gallery in the downtown arts district. It was my first solo show, 15 pieces I'd created over the past 2 years, all exploring themes of betrayal and resilience and the complicated nature of forgiveness. The gallery was packed. My students came, Sophia, now a confident high schooler who wanted to study art in college. My co-workers came. Dr. Chen came. Victoria came with Grace, now a chatty 3-year-old who called me Auntie M, and made crayon drawings she gave me with solemn pride. Mom came. She stood in front of the centerpiece, a large abstract I'd titled After the Fall. It was chaotic and beautiful and painful, all sharp edges and soft curves, darkness and light coexisting. "It's magnificent," Mom said when I joined her. "You're magnificent. I don't know how I missed seeing that before." Victoria appeared at my other side, Grace on her hip. We stood there together, the 3 of us, looking at my painting. "You turned your pain into something beautiful," Victoria said quietly. "You could have let it destroy you. I thought it would. I thought I'd destroyed you. But you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." "I'm not strong," I said. "I'm just stubborn. I refused to let what happened be the end of my story." A journalist from the local arts weekly approached, asking if she could interview me about the show. I excused myself and spent 20 minutes answering questions about my work, my inspiration, my process. I didn't mention Adam or the divorce or the betrayal. Those were the raw materials, but the art had transcended them. The show was written up in the paper the following week. The review called my work hauntingly vulnerable and powerfully redemptive. 3 pieces sold. The money wasn't life-changing, but it was validation that my voice mattered, that my pain transformed into art had value. I used part of the money to take a weekend trip by myself. I drove to a small coastal town 6 hours away, rented a room overlooking the ocean, and spent 3 days walking on the beach and sketching and simply being alone without loneliness. On the last evening, I sat on the sand as the sun set, painting the sky in impossible colors. A man walking his dog stopped to watch me work. "That's beautiful," he said. "Thank you." "You're really talented," I smiled. "I'm working on believing that." He smiled back and continued walking. I returned to my painting. The moment was insignificant and perfect. No grand revelation, no dramatic transformation. Just a quiet evening painting, a sunset, feeling at peace with myself, knowing that I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine and come through it intact. 4 years after the betrayal, Victoria and I took Grace to the Children's Museum on a Saturday. We wandered through exhibits while Grace pressed her nose against glass cases and asked endless questions. We got overpriced sandwiches in the cafe and sat at a small table while Grace colored on the kids' menu. "I'm seeing someone," Victoria said casually. "His name is Marcus. He's a teacher at Grace's preschool. He's kind and patient, and he makes me laugh, and I'm terrified." Terrified why? Because I don't trust my judgment anymore. Because the last time I thought I knew what love was, I destroyed everything. Because I'm scared I'll hurt him or Grace or myself again. I reached across and squeezed her hand. "The fact that you're scared is good. It means you're not being reckless. It means you're thinking about consequences. That's growth, Victoria." "I want to be worthy of happiness," she said softly. "I want to believe I can have a good life after everything I've done." "You can," I told her. "We both can. The past doesn't have to be a prison." Grace looked up from her coloring. Crayon paused midair. "Mama, why are you crying?" "Happy tears," Victoria said, wiping her eyes. "Just happy tears, baby." That evening, back at my apartment alone, I stood at my easel, working on a new piece. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. I love you." I texted back, "I love you too." It was true. Somewhere in the rubble of our destroyed relationship, we'd built something new. Not perfect, not unmarred by the past, but real and hard-won and valuable. I stepped back from my painting. It showed 2 figures, abstract but recognizable, standing on opposite sides of a broken bridge. But they were building a new bridge between them, piece by piece, their hands reaching toward each other across the gap. I didn't know if I'd ever show this one. It felt too personal, too raw. But I needed to create it anyway. Outside my window, the city lights began to glow against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Adam was living his life, probably hurting other people, probably never understanding the damage he'd done. I didn't think about him much anymore. He'd become a character in a story I'd survived, not the defining event of my life. I cleaned my brushes and put away my paints. I made tea and sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the world move around me. I thought about Dr. Reeves telling me not to disappear. I thought about Sophia saying it gets better. I thought about standing in that church on Christmas Eve, broken and alone, not knowing if I'd ever feel whole again. I was whole now, differently shaped than before, carrying scars, but whole. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me. But I'd refused to let it. I'd survived. I'd forgiven when forgiveness seemed impossible. I'd rebuilt when rebuilding seemed pointless. I'd chosen grace over bitterness, healing over revenge, life over the half-death of perpetual victimhood. The night air was cool and clean. I finished my tea. I went inside and climbed into bed, my apartment quiet and peaceful around me. Tomorrow I'd go to brunch with Mom. Tomorrow I'd start a new painting. Tomorrow I'd continue building the life I deserved. But tonight, I simply rested in the knowledge that I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine. And if I could survive that, I could survive anything. The woman who'd opened the door to Adam and Victoria 4 years ago no longer existed. She'd been destroyed. But from her ashes, I'd built someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who understood that happiness isn't something someone can give you or take away. It's something you build for yourself, piece by piece, day by day, choice by choice. And I was happy. Not every moment, not without effort, but truly, deeply, quietly, happy in a way I'd never been before. That was the real victory. Not that Victoria had been abandoned too, not that Adam faced consequences, but that I'd reclaimed my life and transformed my pain into purpose. I closed my eyes and drifted toward sleep, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow held possibility, and I was strong enough to embrace it,